Okay, today's shir is sponsored, we're going to learn Shabbat Daf Mem Bet, and today's shir is sponsored, is dedicated in memory of Natan Tzvi ben Moshe Yehuda Leib Zeiger, Zichrono Livracha, by his daughter, Dr. Robin Zeiger, and his son-in-law, Professor Jonathan ben Ezra. Okay, we're going to start at the top of Mem Bet. We finished yesterday, and we were kind of in the middle. We were talking about the Mishnah, where it talked about putting cold water into a heating, something that was heated with hot water in it, and they emptied out the hot water, put in cold water, and we then saw that there's a machloket Rav and Shmuel about how much water is allowed to put in, and it's not just, remember, if you have a small amount, that's not allowed because that's going to heat up the water. If you put in a larger amount, it becomes allowed because it's just cooling off the water, warming up the water, taking the chill out. But then when it gets to a really large amount where you're kind of filling up the whole utensil, then Rav says already that's not allowed because that's going to help the kli, the utensil, to become finalized, right, formed, which we call seiruf. So now Rav says, if you're going to put that much water in, that's a problem. Shmuel says, even if you put that much in, it's not a problem because your intent is not to do what we call tziruf kli. You're not intending for that. You're just intending to get the chill out of the cold water, and that's allowed. And that's based on the machloket. They fall into the category of the one follows Rabbi Yehuda about davar she'eino mitkaven is forbidden. That's Rav. And Shmuel says davar she'eino mitkaven is mutar. And he holds like Rabbi Shimon. So comes the Gemara and questions, L'meimer de Shmuel ke Rabbi Shimon spirale? In explaining Shmuel this way, are you trying, by the way, this is very classic in the Gemara where they're trying to explain some opinion. That, again, there was a bit of a debate about what exactly Rabbi Shimon said. The Gemara kind of, what Shmuel said, they corrected saying that Shmuel actually says this. But in the end, they say, well, if Shmuel says that, that's going to contradict something else that Shmuel said. So how could that be? So now they say, well, if you say that Shmuel says this, then you're going to end up with a problem because you're going to end up saying that Shmuel doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon. And in fact, Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon. And in fact, we see from somewhere else, Shmuel doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon in davar she'eino mitkaven. So let's read it inside. L'meimer de Shmuel ke Rabbi Shimon spirale. V'hamar Shmuel, in a separate case, Shmuel says, Mechabim kachelet shamatecha b'reshut harabim b'shvil shelo yizoku barabim. Let's say you have this burning hot metal utensil in the middle of the street. Are you allowed to put this out on Shabbat? Because we're not allowed to be extinguished. Mechabeh. On the other hand, it's very dangerous. Yizoku barabim, right? When it comes to a public hazard, we allow certain things. So, in fact, you're allowed to do this on Shabbat. Aval lo gachelet shel eitz. So Shmuel himself says you're allowed to put out if the burning hot item is made of metal, you're allowed to put it out. But if it's made of wood, you're not allowed to put it out. So, Isa gadata savar Rabbi Shimon, if you're going to say holds like Rabbi Shimon, afilu shel eitz nami. We should allow it even if it's wood. Okay, first of all, what's the difference between gachelet of matechet and one of wood? Okay, the metal versus the wood. So there's a lot of different opinions about this. It's not so clear why they make this distinction. It's interesting that some of them make the distinction based on the act that you're doing itself. Okay, whereas burning, if you remember what we learned about extinguishing, the whole issue is that when you extinguish, it's not because you want to extinguish it, but it's like the malacha they did in the Mishkan where they wanted it for the pacham, for the black, the coal, the charcoal that comes out of it. Or when it came to a wick, it was in order to prepare the wicks for lighting. That's not going to be our issue here. When you have a gachelet shel eitz, it actually, when you put it out, it makes this pacham. But when you have one made of metal, it doesn't make any pacham. Think about it. When you put out metal, right, nothing happens. There's no formation of charcoal from metal. So that's one reason to distinguish, because it's not ending up being like the malacha in the Mishkan at all. Another possibility is interesting. It's more the hazard, not what the act is, but how dangerous it is for people. Now think about it. If you see a burning coal that's firing up, right? What happens if it's made of wood? It's going to turn red, right? You know, coals turn red when they're very hot, which means that if it's on the street, everyone's going to see and everyone's going to notice. But if it's metal, what happens? It doesn't necessarily turn red. Imagine, right, this happens very often in your house. Let's say you cooked up something and the pot's sitting there and nobody really knows the pot's hot. You can't tell whether it's hot or not, assuming it's covered, there's no steam coming out, and somebody touches it and they didn't realize that it was burning hot. Or this happened in my house. Someone got a really bad burn from a cookie sheet, right? Someone took the cookie sheet out of the oven. The cookies were no longer on it. The cookie sheet was on the side. They didn't know it was burning hot and they touched it and got burnt. So that's something that you wouldn't necessarily notice, and therefore it's a hazard that you're allowed to deal with because it would be a real public hazard, whereas burning red, fiery coals are very noticeable and no one's going to come to touch them, even if they're sitting in the middle of the road. So therefore, there's this distinction. Now, if you hold that davar she'eino mitkaven is mutar, where we don't care, right? In other words, if, as long as you didn't intend, now you didn't really intend to, now it's a little bit tricky here, and the answer is going to actually resolve this tricky part, but they basically are viewing this right now as if it's a davar she'eino mitkaven. It's not actually a davar she'eino mitkaven, but theoretically, if we look at it, and this is what the Rishonim are going to explain, what was even the similarity? The similarity is that there's no, right, your intent is not really to do the pu'ula of extinguishing, you're just trying to deal with a public hazard. So therefore, why doesn't Shmuel allow it even in a gachelet of eitz? So now they're going to explain, wait a minute, you're confusing apples and oranges. This isn't davar she'eino mitkaven, okay? And here it's a good, one of these good sugyot where we can really define what are these different categories that we're going to talk about. One is davar she'eino mitkaven, and one is malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. Davar she'eino mitkaven is when you intended to do a particular thing, okay? Like, let's say, I'll give you one of the classic examples. You want to wash your hands, and you wash your hands over the grass. So what's your intent? Your intent is to wash your hands. The act you're doing is washing your hands. It happens that while you're washing your hands, you're watering the grass. So that's davar she'eino mitkaven. So that's similar to what we talked about yesterday, where you're pouring the water into the utensil in order to cool, to warm up, to take the chill out of the water. However, right, that's not the same as this case where you have coals in the middle of the street. And what are you doing? Well, your act is extinguishing. You're actually intending to do the malacha. It's not davar she'eino mitkaven. I didn't accidentally extinguish them because I was doing something else. No, your intent is to extinguish. So that's not davar she'eino mitkaven. However, why are you extinguishing? The reason why you're extinguishing is not for the, and this, now we get into malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. You're not doing it for the reason they extinguished in the Beit HaMikdash, which is you want the charcoal from it. You're doing it because it's creating a public hazard in the street. So that's what we call malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. So now we're going to say, but how does it work? So why does Rabbi Shimon distinguish? How does that resolve how he distinguishes between eitz and matechet? Because we'll say like this: the davar she'eino mitkaven savar lak Rabbi Shimon. That's fine. That's the previous sugya. But b'malacha she'ena tzricha legufa savar lak Rabbi Yehuda. He distinguishes between those two machlokot, and in that machloket he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. If Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you're doing a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa, it's actually asur midoraita. Okay, it's forbidden. So now if it's forbidden midoraita, well, we're not going to allow you to do that, even if it's creating a public hazard. Okay, that's where we started with Rashi. Something's doraita, even if it's creating a public hazard, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbat. So when it comes to putting out the coals that were made of wood, that is exactly, even though you're doing it not for the same purpose they did in the Mishkan, it's exactly the way they did it in the Mishkan, because there the charcoal is created, even if you're not intending to create the charcoal. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda would say, that's a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa, because you're doing it for a different reason. However, the charcoal is still being created, and therefore it's asur, even if it's a public hazard. When it comes to matechet, it's only d'Rabbanan, because it doesn't create any charcoal. So even though you were intending for charcoal, we don't care whether you were intending for charcoal or not, but in this case, it's not even a d'oraita malacha. So therefore, since it's only d'Rabbanan, we're going to allow you to do that when it creates a public hazard. And therefore, this whole thing is really not raising a question at all, because it's not the same thing. Again, so you have to wonder why they think it was the same thing. Didn't they know the difference between davar she'eino mitkaven and malacha she'ena tzricha legufa? So again, like I said before, it's really that both are somewhat similar, because your intent is what's important. Were you intending for the malacha? Were you intending? There's some similarity here. There's some crossover, but it's still somewhat different. And then It's interesting to note that Shmuel, you might have thought that these two were somewhat interconnected in the sense that if you're going to hold like Rabbi Shimon in one, you'll hold like Rabbi Shimon in the other. And here we see that, no, really, right, Shmuel took one side on one machloket and one on the other. Okay, now, since we just showed that what, okay, now we're getting off on a tangent. From bringing in this sugya, we saw that if there's a public hazard, we allow you to do something that's a Rabbanan to prevent the public hazard. So Ravina says, let's say there's a thorn in the middle of the street, something that could cause danger to people. What do you do with it in the middle of Shabbat? And it's in the middle of Reshut HaRabim, in the public thoroughfare. You can move it. Now this goes back to the beginning of Shabbat. What can you do? You can move it less than 4 amot, put it down. Pick it up, move it less than 4 amot, put it down. Pick it up, move it less than 4 amot, and you can move it in that way to get it to the side of Reshut HaRabim. Ube Carmelit, and since a Carmelit is only Derabanan, Afilu Tuva, you can even move it more than 4 amot in a Carmelit. Because remember, Carmelit, Mitaoraita is totally fine. It's not a Reshut HaRabim, but we treat it like a Reshut HaRabim from rabbinic prohibition. So since it's only rabbinic prohibition, you can move it as much as you want in the Carmelit. And in Reshut HaRabim, since it's only Doraita to move something 4 amot, you can move it less than 4 amot, and that's to prevent public hazards. But again, it's interesting that if it's a Doraita, we don't allow it, and then it actually becomes something dangerous. Okay. Aval notain. So now we're going back to the Mishnah, although we're not going to exactly deal directly with the Mishnah, but the Mishnah said here, distinguish between, you could put it in a kos if you remember, kedei lafshiran, in order to get the chill out, you can put the water into a cup. So now we're going to bring a whole big machloka between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, and then there's this third opinion. And we're going to have to understand what exactly the third opinion holds. And there's 2 charts on the page. If you look at the sheet, we're going to see 2 different opinions about this, this last opinion and where he holds exactly. So we'll have 2 different versions. Tanu Rabbanan. Noten adam chamim letoch hatzonen, velo hatzonen letoch hachamim, divrei Beit Shammai. You could put hot water into cold water. Okay, now let's say you have a cup or something big or full of hot water. You can't put cold water into hot because what happens? Okay, this is a big debate that actually comes up in another sugya somewhere else. I forget where it is, maybe in Psachim. But tatai gavar or ilai gavar? Is it what's at the top that's kovea or what's at the bottom? Tatai is the bottom. So if the hot water is at the bottom, right, imagine, right, this would be a good science experiment to do. Right? People have time to do stuff with their kids now. You can try this at home. Take hot water, the same amount of hot and cold water, put in cold water to the hot or put in hot water to the cold and then measure the temperature, right? Which one, does the water get heated up more if the hot water is at the bottom, or does the water get heated up more if the hot water is at the top? In another sugya, there's a machloket about this between Rav and Shmuel. I forget exactly where the machloket is, but there's a bit of a debate here because it's a bit of a complicated. If we really say that we're talking, I'm just going to raise a question. I'm not going to answer it here. It's a much more complicated thing, but this sugya seems to say, and we'll see in a minute, that everyone agrees that tatai kavar, that it's the bottom that's important, which is strange because Rav and Shmuel later debate this, and how could they debate this if it's obvious from here? But that's a whole separate question. But anyway, maybe this isn't tatai gavar, ilai gavar, but I'll leave that as a question, as an aside. So anyway, let's just read again. Noten adam chamim letoch tzonin. You could put hot water into cold water because again, the cold water won't get heated up because what you're pouring over is not going to be as strong as what's underneath. But lo hatzonen letoch hachamim. But you can't put cold into hot. Divrei Beit Shammai. Ubeit Hillel omrim bein chamim letoch hatzonen ubein tzonen letoch hachamim mutar. Both are allowed, but in which case, b'med dvarim amurim bekos. Beit Hillel allows this only in a cup. When you don't have a lot of water, or, okay, there's a debate, what's the difference between a cup, and we'll see in a minute, about ambati, if it's in an ambati, which we keep discussing, which is kind of like a big utensil full of a lot of water. Chamim l'toch hatzonein v'lo tzonein l'toch hachamim. There he agrees with Beit Shammai in principle, the tatai gavar, that what's at the bottom is what basically is the determining factor. However, he disagrees about where, he basically says that it's allowed though in a cup. Okay, what's the difference between a kos and an ambati? Some people say kli rishon kli sheni. Maybe that's the issue, that the water was heated up in the ambati. Some people say, right, it's bigger, there's more water in there. And also the ambati, another good explanation is that in a cup, like imagine the temperature you want in a bath and the temperature you want in a cup. And well, although I don't know, one could argue this, but in a bath they want the water very hot, but in a cup, since you're drinking it, you don't want it to be as hot. Okay, I mean theoretically in a bath you also don't want it to be so hot, because also we're going to see that later, that when they bathe they actually would put cold water into it. But anyway, there's a debate about what exactly the differences are. So here comes the third opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Osir. Okay, now, what is he Osir? It's not so clear. Is he Osir everything? Okay, is he Osir, right? It's not so clear, so we're going to see right now. First, Amar Rav Nachman halacha ke Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Okay, we actually paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, which is interesting because he's machmir. So, Savar Rav Yosef l'Meimer. Now we're going to see, Rav Yosef wanted to say, okay, we have kos, which is something small. We have an abati, which is something very big. What about a sefel? A sefel was a basin. I'm assuming it was a basin they used for washing, for bathing, right? There were two ways they would bathe, either in a big bathtub, like in a bathhouse, or often we think about people in those days, they would bathe with a basin full of water and they would bathe themselves with it. So sefel, Rabbi Yosef wanted to say, sefel hareu ke'ambati. It's like an ambatya, okay? So, which means we're going to be more machmir there, right? There is where Beit Hillel agrees with Beit Shammai that you can't put cold water into hot water. So Amar le'Abaye, Abaye says to Rabbi Yosef, Tani Rabbi Chia, but Rabbi Chia has a braita where he says, Sefel eno ka'ambatya, okay? And therefore you must be wrong, because you must have not known this braita, and here it seems clear that we're going to treat a sefel like a cup. So now they're going to ask a question. What was Rabbi Yosef thinking in the first place? The fact that he thought originally the sefel hareu ka'ambati, the Amar Rav Nachman halacha ke Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, and Rav Nachman paskins like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Now the assumption is Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya doesn't allow. Okay, if he's oser, okay, it sounds like he's saying something different from Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. So if he's oser, it must be he forbids chamin letoch tzonein and tzonein letoch chamin. Because remember, Beit Shammai said you could put chamin, you could put hot water into cold water. And Beit Hillel said you can do both as long as it's a cup, not a bathtub. Came Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya and he says you can't do anything. So now they're going to say, what was Rabbi Yosef thinking then? If you say that sefel hareu ka'ambati, ve'amar Rav Nachman halacha ke Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, ela b'shat rechitza, b'shabbat rechitza b'chamin leita. According to this, if he's going to treat a sefel like an ambatya, and Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya is basically coming to say he disagrees with Beit Hillel, that, right, because of ambati, you can't do anything, okay, so, and we're going to treat a sefel like an ambati, then basically you're going to end up saying that there's no way, if you're going to treat a sefel like an ambati, you can't ever wash with, now what can't you wash with? With water that was heated up before Shabbat. Remember we learned if the water was heated up before Shabbat, what can you do? You can still wash your hands, your face, and your feet with it. So now it's going to come that according to Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, and Rav Nachman said we paskin that way, you can't do anything. You can't basically take water that was heated up, because the assumption is that the water was heated up, even though it was heated up before Shabbat, somehow you were able to keep it hot. Imagine like a thermos type thing. And then when you put it in your basin, you have to add some cold water to it. Or maybe do it in the reverse way. Put cold water in first and then add hot water. But if you can't use a sefel, then how else are you going to do this, right? People didn't use a cup to mix their hot water, right? Again, this is hard for us to imagine. We have sinks and taps. But if they didn't have that, where would they mix their water for washing their hands, their feet, and their face? In a basin. And if Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya forbids everything, then we have no way to basically wash. And it's clear that there is a way to wash, so it can't possibly be. So this doesn't make any sense. So therefore, we're going to say like this. Wait, mi savart Rabbi Shimon a-seifakai a-reishakai. Okay, really Rabbi Shimon was talking about the reisha. And then, what does this mean? Beit Hillel metzirim ben chamin letoch tzonein uben tzonein letoch chamin. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya otzer tzonein letoch chamin. He's just disagreeing about the tzonein letoch chamin part. He says you can't put cold into hot, but you can't put hot into cold. Now, what's the problem with saying that that's what Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya says? Because then he's saying exactly what Beit Shammai says. And this was set up as if there's three different opinions, right? There's Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, and Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. Now, I don't know if this struck you as odd, but it is a little odd to have three opinions Two of them are Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, and a third is a different Tana. It's usually not like that. It's usually there's a Machlokah Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, right? And then maybe someone else has a different understanding of the Machloket or something like that. It's not so normal that there's three opinions. But anyway, they assume right now there's three opinions, in which case they say, well, something doesn't make sense here. Because if you're going to say that Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh only forbids sonen l'toch chamin, but actually you could put chamin l'toch sonen, you could put hot water into cold, and that's how we have a case with a basin where we're allowed to wash, and therefore all makes sense. So now we're going to say, Lema Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, Damar Kabeit Shammai. But then it ends up he's saying the exact same thing as Beit Shammai. So now we're stuck. Again, this was all to understand Rav Yosef, who thought that Sefel was like an ambati, and then that's how we got to this. So now we're going to say like this, Hachi Kamra. No, you misunderstood Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. Look, what he really was saying is, Lo nechlaku Beit Shammai u'Beit Hillel b'davar zeh. What he was really saying is, there's no machloka Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel about this. In other words, both agree that when it comes to an ambatya, then everyone agrees that you can't put chamin, you can't put sonen l'toch chamin. Okay, there's no disagreement about that. And then that's what he's saying. It's not that it's not that he's holding like Beit Shammai. He's actually saying you misunderstood the machloket. They don't actually disagree about this. Okay, and then it comes out, as you can see on the sheet, that it comes out. In a second, I want to open my sheet. That you end up right that their machloket is about when it comes to chamin l'toch sonen, everyone agrees that it's allowed, and when it comes to sonen l'toch chamin, everyone agrees that it's asur, and their machloket is only about is it allowed in the cup and not in the ambatya. Okay, and that's where we get to. Okay, so now we're going to have Amar Rav Huna. Okay, so now we're going to say Amar Rav Huna, B'rei de Rabbi Yeshua, Chazina le'Rava de lo kapid amana. Okay, now he says, I see with Rava that he wasn't very careful about this, meaning he would mix his sonen l'toch chamin, his chamin l'toch sonen. Why? Midetani Rabbi Chia, okay, in the sefel. Okay, again, the whole question is about the sefel. So now, when it comes to the sefel, he says like this. Rava said, no problem. You could do both directions, meaning it's like Beit Hillel and like a cup. Midetani Rabbi Chia, again, we bring a braita from Rabbi Chia. Noten adam kiton shamayim letoch sefel shamayim, bein chamin letoch tzonein, ubein tzonein letoch chamin. Here we have it. Here's a braita explicitly. What did he do? He brought a jug of water and he put it in a sefel, a basin of water. Either direction, it doesn't matter whether the jug had cold water and he was putting in hot water or the reverse. So what do you see here? You can put it in, and therefore Rava didn't really, right? He wasn't very makpid on this. He said there's no problem to do this. So Amar Rav Huna le Rav Ashi. But now Rav Huna says about this, but even though he did this, maybe that braita isn't really a great proof, because Dilma Shane Hatam de Mifsak Kli. Notice what the case was. The case was he put a jug into a basin. Now a jug in a basin, think about it. The jug protects the water in the jug, meaning let's say it's hot in the basin and you put this jug into the hot water. It's not going to heat up as well if it's in a jug than if you just pour the water directly in. So maybe that's why, but pouring water directly in, cold water into hot water, maybe that would still be a problem inside this basin. So what does he say? No, don't try to say go against Rava because of this. He says, Amarle me'are itmar. Oh, I have a different version of that braita. Your braita said, noten adam, you could put a jug of water. But that's not the version I have. My version says me'are, which means pour. You can pour your jug of water into the hot water in the basin. And here he rereads it. Me'are adam kiton shamayim. This is my version. You can pour a jug of water, litoch sefel shamayim, ben chamin litoch tzonen, ben tzonen litoch chamin, which then shows that you can pour it and the water can mix up. And there you see why Rabbi wasn't careful about this, because he held, based on this braita of Rabbi Chia, that it's not a problem. Okay, new Mishnah. Ha'ilfas v'hakdera she'eviran mirotchin lo yiten letochan tavlin. Aval notenu letoch ha'ka'ara or letoch ha'tamchot. Okay, there's different opinions about what exactly we're talking about here, but let's assume the simple reading, which is in ilfas or a kdera are what we call a kli rishon. These are utensils, okay? An ilfas is a stew pot, and a kdera is a different kind of pot. these are pots that are generally on the fire. Now, if they're on the fire, and then you take them off, heavy run, and you took them off the fire, mirutachin, and they're still boiling hot, you cannot put spices inside them, because what will happen, the spices cook in a kli rishon. That's the whole idea. A kli rishon is very hot, right? Because, again, either because the sides of the kli are very hot because they were heated, or maybe because it was on the heat for a while, right? Think about an oven that was on for longer, how it retains its heat longer, even when you turn it off. So likewise, this kli, because it was on the fire for a while, it has a lot of heat in it, and therefore you can't put a tavlin inside. But but you can put it in what we call a kli sheni, a kli that wasn't on the fire ever. Okay, this is kind of the second utensil. This is a bowl or a tamchoy, which was some sort of, Rashi says it was some sort of big ka'ara, that they would dump all the stew into this, right? Imagine like a cholent serving tray, right? There are people have things, sometimes some people serve directly from the pot, some people, right, take it and put it into something else and put it on the table. So it would be something like that. So you're allowed to put spices into there because we generally say kli sheni eno mevashel, right? It doesn't cook things. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, this by the way is like one of the basic sugyas for kli rishon, kli sheni. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lakol hu noten. No, you can actually put it in anything, and we're going to have to understand exactly what he's referring to. Chutz midavar sheyesh bo chometz v'tzir. Okay, you can put the tavlin into anything unless there's vinegar or brine in the kli, in which case that, okay, now again, let's try the simple reading of Rabbi Yehuda. Again, I don't know, there's different readings of it, but I'll go with what to me seems the simple reading. What he's saying is you can put it in a kli sheni as long as it doesn't have sear or chometz in it. Okay, that's one possibility. Or maybe what he's saying is you could put it in a kli rishon even. Tamlinim don't cook in a kli rishon unless there's vinegar or brine. Now the issue with vinegar or brine is the assumption is those help things cook quicker. So either he's saying even in a kli rishon, if it doesn't have vinegar or brine, you're allowed to put spices in. Or he's saying in a kli sheni, if it has vinegar or brine, you can't even put it in a kli sheni. Okay, so there's a debate about what exactly we're going to see. It's exactly the Gemara's question. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yehuda areish shakai ulakula, is he saying even in a kli rishon it's okay? He was referring to a kli rishon and saying kli rishon without vinegar and brine is totally fine. Or odilma asefa kaira lechumra, or is he going lechumra and saying in a kli sheni you can't even cook in a kli sheni if it has vinegar or brine in it? And then he's being more machmir. So that's the debate about Rabbi Yehuda here. So Tashma, let's learn from some other source. Ditanya. Okay, we'll take another source where Rabbi Yehuda appears about this topic, and let's see what he says there, and then we can learn about our case. Because in our case, there's two different readings, it's really not clear. But in that source it says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, L'kol ilpasin hu noten, you can put in any ilfas, that's a kli rishon. L'kol akderot rotchot hu noten, any pot that's boiling, you can put it in. Chutz midavar sheyesh bo chometz v'tzir. So what do you see? He's makel here. He says, spices can go in a kli rishon. You don't have to worry about them getting cooked up unless it has vinegar or brine. Now we're going to have a debate about salt. Where does salt fall in? Is salt, the basic idea is spices, okay, according to the general opinion, they cook in a kli rishon, they don't cook in a kli sheni. Again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he thinks they only cook in a kli rishon if there's vinegar or brine, otherwise they won't cook. Now we're going to talk about salt. Where does salt fall in? Okay, now we're going to see three opinions about salt. Okay, it's going to be a bit extreme. There's actually two versions of reading the sugya. The first version, you're going to have three different opinions about salt. The second version, you're going to have only two opinions about salt. So there's a debate about how to read this. And it's very interesting because, again, you could say, why did they do scientific experiments and figure it out? But there's this debate about what does it take for salt to cook? Does salt cook very easily? Does salt not cook very easily? And then it will affect where you can put salt. So actually, it's a sugya very similar to the one we just saw on the previous page, which is Rabbi Yosef thought to say something, and Abaye says, how can you say this? Because there's a bright of Rabbi Chia that says the following. It's the exact same thing we saw in the other sugya earlier today. So same thing here. Sefer Rabbi Yosef Lememar, he wanted to say, Melach hareu kitavlin. Salt is just like any other spice, which is, again, not Rabbi Yehuda, but the basic opinion, to B'kli Rishon b'shelah, u'b'kli sheni lo b'shelah, that it will cook in a Kli Rishon, but it won't cook in a Kli Sheni. Amar le Abaye, Abaye says to him, Tani Rabbi Chia, but Rabbi Chia has a brayta where he says, Melach eina ketavlin. Salt is an exception to the rule. B'kli sheni nami b'shelah. It's what we call kalei bishul. It's things that cook very easily. Even in a Kli Sheni, it cooks. Upliga de Rav Nachman, and this actually, and that's why I said there's three opinions. So we had Rav Yosef who wanted to say it's just like any other spice. Kli Rishon, you can't put it. Kli Sheni, you can. Then we have Abaye who says no, it's not like a regular spice. It can cook so easily you can't even put it in a Kli Sheni. Upliga de Rav Nachman, de Amar Rav Nachman, Sricha milcha bishula kebisra de Torah. He says salt needs cooking like the meat of an ox, which means it's very hard to cook it. It takes a lot of cooking. You can only cook it on a fire. Right? Nobody would cook their meat off the fire. Nobody does that, right? You always cook it with a fire. You wouldn't put it in a pot. You can't put a piece of meat in a pot that's hot, that's off the fire and say, oh, it'll cook. Nobody would do that. So salt is like that, which basically means that you can even put it in a Kli Rishon off the fire, okay? So that's the big debate. By the way, I want to point out something here. This is very famous. It says here, it's if we go back to the earlier opinion, Abaye says it's kalei habishul. It cooks very easily, that even in a Kli Sheni it will cook. There's this big debate about a Kli Shlishi, and this is why there's a big debate about tea. There's people who make their tea before Shabbat, and there's people who say, oh no, you can make tea in a Kli Shlishi. So what's the difference between them? Why do some people say that and some people say that? Because the Gemara never talks about a Kli Shlishi. The Gemara just says it can cook in a Kli Sheni. Now, if we cook in a Kli Sheni, does that mean if it goes down another level to a Kli Shlishi, well, there it can't cook, right? Does it mean Kli Sheni, yes, but any further, no? Or does it mean that this can so easily cook that even, it doesn't matter if it was on the fire, wasn't on the fire, if the walls are hot or not, it cooks so easily that even in a Kli Shlishi, Revi'i, it doesn't matter how many kelim you go, it can still cook. And that's the big debate. Because it never talks about a Kli Shlishi, it's only inferred from Kli Sheni it cooks in, but what would be past there, that's a big debate. And that's why there's a debate in Halacha, whether you can make tea on Shabbat or not, whether you have to prepare it from before Shabbat or you can make it in a Kli Shlishi. Okay, so now that was the first reading. And then, right, Rav Nachman has this other shita that it needs to cook for a long time. Ve'ika da'amri, some people say that this was the way it went. Saba Rav Yosef lemeimar melach hareu kitavlin. Salt is like a spice. Okay, this is the same. B'kli rishon b'shelah, b'kli sheni lo b'shelah. Rav Yosef is the same in both sugya. Amar le Abaye, but now Abaye's reaction is the opposite reaction. In the first sugya, what we say, Abaye said, oh, it cooks so easily. In this version, Abaye says the opposite. Amar le Abaye, Tani Rabbi Chia says in a brayta, melach eina ketavlin. It's not like a spice, but now it's not like a spice in the other direction. To b'kli rishon nami lo b'shelah. It doesn't even cook in a kli rishon. And now we're going to bring in Rav Nachman, not to say there's a third opinion, but Rav Nachman is exactly what Abaye says, which is Hainu Damar Rav Nachman, Sricha milcha bishula kebisra de Torah. And there Rav Nachman fits in very nicely with Abaye rather than creating a third opinion. Okay, so two ways of reading the sugya. And what's interesting is in the second sugya, so he doesn't think salt is kalei habishul. Okay. By the way, we don't hold that salt is like kalei habishul. Okay, you can put salt in a kli rishon. I think even in the kli rishon, you could see I didn't check this out, but you see the aleph is next to the opinion that melach eina ketavlin de b'kli rishon nami lo b'shelah. So it seems like you can put salt into a kli rishon. Okay, new Mishnah. Now we're moving topics a little bit. We're moving into Dine Muktzah. Okay, things that are set aside and things you can do. So let's see. Ein nutznim kli tachat haner lekabel bo et hashemen. If you want to put a utensil under the nair, remember the nair was a utensil where they put oil in and they put a wick and they would light it up, right? A little different from our candles. And sometimes the oil would spill over. So they're telling you that you can't put a utensil under the candle. Again, candle is not candle, under this utensil they would use for the oil. Lekabel bo et hashemen, to get any oil that spills off. Okay, you're not allowed to do this because why? So Rashi says the issue is, here, let's see, lekabel bo shemen ha-metaftef, mishum de shemen muktzehu. The shemen is muktzah. Why? Because you designated it to be used on, you designate it to be used on Shabbat for lighting the candles. So therefore it's set aside, you can't use it. Right? Imagine if the oil comes off and drips off into this kli, right? You can't use that oil on Shabbat for anything else because it was designated for lighting candles on Shabbat. So therefore, kasavar, so now what becomes the problem with this kli? Ein kli nital b'Shabbat ela letzorech davar nital. The first potential answer Rashi gives is that what's happening here is this is what we call, you can't carry something on Shabbat unless it's for something that's not muktzah. Here you're carrying this utensil on Shabbat to put it under the candle, and the candle itself is muktzah. So you can't use a utensil for something that's to kind of serve something that's muktzah. That's one option. Second option is, inami kasavar asur levatel kli mehechano. Once you put that candle, that utensil under the oil, what's going to happen? Well, you now can't move it for the rest of Shabbat. Okay? So this is what's called asur levatel kli mehechano. You can't, Rashi says, lahoshiv kli b'makom shelo yuchal od litlo. You're basically, it's like he says it interestingly, dahavi ki kovea lo makom umechabro betit v'dame lemalacha. It's as if you're sticking it in there with glue, right, with cement, as if you're cementing it down, because you're not going to be allowed to move this for the rest of Shabbat. Because once it's serving something that's muktzah, it itself becomes muktzah, and you're not allowed to create a situation where this kli is now here and can't ever move. Okay? So there's two possibilities about what the issue is. Again, I'll repeat. Either you're not allowed to carry it. It's interesting. One is referring to the act of putting it there, and one is referring, or kind of, you can't, let me think about it, but you can't change the status of this kli to make it that you no longer can use it. Or the other is, I wanted to say the first one first. You can't carry something for the purposes of something that's muktzah. So that's, you can't from the beginning even move it because you're using it for something that's muktzah. The second is, right, because then what's going to happen? The oil's going to drip on it, and the oil you can't use. So you can't kind of put a kli there for use for something that has no use on Shabbat. The other is you can't basically put it there because by putting it there, you're cementing it down, and that's like a malacha of cementing it down. Okay, so now you can't do this. But if you put it there from before Shabbat, it's allowed. Okay, so now Tosfot says, if you look at Tosfot, it's a very short Tosfot. Ve'im netanumi ba'od yom mutal. He says halashon dachuk dahavi le'lamemar aval mi ba'od yom notnin. If it really meant that you can put it there before Shabbat, right, which sounds like what it means, it should have said you could put it there before Shabbat. So Tosfot kind of points out that it sounds like maybe you're not really allowed to put it there before Shabbat, but if you did, then it's okay. Okay, so there's a debate about how exactly to understand that mi ba'od yom. If you put it there, it's okay. Okay, and then what does that mean exactly? It's okay. Or maybe you're actually allowed to put it there, mi ba'od yom. But even if you do put it there, mi ba'od yom, okay, let's say you put it there Friday afternoon, either because you were allowed to, or even if you weren't allowed to, but you did it anyway. Let's say the oil drips in now over Shabbat. It drips into this kli that you put. Are you allowed to take oil from there? For sure not, because that's a good case. It's like fruits on a tree, right? Fruits on a tree were not ready before Shabbat to be used. This oil was designated for candle lighting, and therefore if the oil drips on Shabbat, you're not allowed to use the oil. So now Rav Chisda comes and he says, Amar Rav Chisda, af al pi she'amru ein notnim kli tachat hatarnagol lekabel beitzata, aval kofeh aleh kli shelo tishaver. Now he's moving into a different issue. The Gemara is bringing up a related issue. If you have a tarnagol, and the tarnagol lays an egg, what's the problem? The tarnagol lays an egg, the hen lays an egg on Shabbat. What's going to be the problem? Well, the egg, somebody might step on it, right? You want to protect this egg, but an egg is muktzah because it wasn't ready before Shabbat. It wasn't enam and amuchan. So what does he say? Well, if it's on an incline, so you can't put a kli there to catch the egg as it drips down, okay? As it's kind of rolling down. But what you can do is, kofeh aleh kli. If you have the egg on the ground and you don't want anyone to step on it, take a kli, put it upside down, take a bowl, let's say, and stick the bowl on top of the egg. That you're allowed to do. So Amar Rabba, my time with the Rav Chisda. So what's his reason? Why does he say you could do this? Kasavar, he holds, Ve'en asuya lahatil beitata bimkom midron. Says, first of all, let's distinguish between a hen generally lays an egg where? In a garbage dump. Now, interestingly, he says in a garbage dump, people often walk in the garbage dump. Okay, the garbage dumps were probably a little different than ours. People often went there to recycle materials and take things from the garbage. Maybe it's more like a recycle bin. So people will generally go there, but, generally the hen will lay its eggs there, but it won't lay its eggs on an incline. Now, generally, you won't need to catch it on that way, right? You'll need to more put a kli on top of it. He says, since this is something that generally is done, right? If we take the general way things are done, so we're allowed to save it that way. We can save it in the normal case, and therefore we can put a kli on top, but we can't save it if it's going on an incline because that's not a typical place where a hen's going to lay an egg. Okay, so now they say Eitiv Abaye, so now they're going to have a whole slew of questions, which we're not going to get to all of them now, but Abaye brings up, what do you mean they didn't allow saving something on Shabbat, protecting something? In other words, again, this is where our sugya started today. We started our Gemara with this case about the item burning in the middle of Rishut Rabim, and we want to protect it, right? We want to protect people. Here also, we're talking about things that are allowed in order to protect things, right? We always have this problem on Shabbat where something comes up, right? You want to protect something, right? Let's say the classic case that we talked about the dead person, and you want to, let's say take the dead person out of the sun, the dead body. So, there's all these cases where the question is, what can we allow and what can't we allow? So they make this distinction between something that's common versus something that's not common. And this is very, common in halacha, where if something is very common, then the rabbis made dispensations for it, versus something that's not so common that they didn't make dispensations for. So now, Abaye says, where do you get this? That we're going to bring all these cases where it seems like it's common, it's not common, and yet they allowed things. So here's the case. He has a barrel full of items that he hasn't yet taken Trumot to Masro. Now we know that if you haven't taken Trumot to Masro, what do we say? That's muktzah. It's not minamuchan. It's not something that you're allowed to use on Shabbat. But if your barrel breaks on the top of your roof, mevi kli umeniach tachtav. You can put a kli underneath it to basically catch it from falling all over the place. So you can protect them. So why do we do that? That's not the most common thing, that you have a barrel on your roof full of unmeisered stuff and it breaks. So what do they answer? No, we're talking about a new earthenware vessel, which actually is pretty common that will break. And then we can say, there's a common case. It's very often that it does kind of explode. Today, second question, and we'll end with this for today. You could put a kli underneath the candle in order to protect sparks that come out of it. So, and the assumption here is that, okay, this connects with our Mishnah, right? Because we talked about putting a kli under. Well, you can put it if it's going to protect from sparks. Okay, that's different from you're trying to gather the oil so that you don't lose the oil. So here we're going to say, this is not a common case that there's sparks, right? How often is it that sparks come out of your candles? But the Gemara actually answers no. Okay, actually, it is very common that you'll have these sparks coming out, and therefore it's allowed. Okay, so again, we're going to continue tomorrow with more cases that seem to be uncommon, and each time they're going to say, oh, no, that really is common. And basically, that's this distinction between the kli that you put on top of the tarnagolet, right? You can put on top of the egg this kli, because it's very common that you'll have an egg that's laid on Shabbat, right? Imagine, think about their issues, right? If their hens lay eggs every day, what's going to happen with all these eggs that the hen lays? So you're allowed to basically cover it with a kli. That's allowed because they made this dispensation for things that are not, things that are very common, they allowed us to do it. Okay, that's it for today. We'll pick up tomorrow. If I can, I'll try to post the shir later today for Shabbat. If not, it'll go up after Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.